So did you get the notes? You need the note packet for sure, because I tend to go fast and give you probably more than you actually need. So I decided to just give you my notes. So that way you can go back and read over things. This is actually, there's 2 sessions and they're not identical. So this one is session 1 on the first half of the notes, and then this afternoon is session 2 on the last half of the notes. But I gave you the notes in case you don't want to come to session 2, you want to go hear somebody else, you can read the others. I won't take offense, so that's a kind of the game for. So my wife just went to the emergency room. She's been sick all week. And so if I get interrupted here with a phone call,
So you've heard this kind of.
yeah, she's there now by herself. So I might be distracted for a second, but if you don't mind. So.
Great.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, somebody said they could come and read my notes. I don't think so. So. Okay, we have a lot to do, and it's good to have you. And let's pray. All right. God, just thank you for the next hour. May it be profitable in reshaping our thinking, growing our thinking where truth is concerned, so that we can be a better representative to those that we talk to who hold views that are contrary to truth, but they think it's truth. And we just pray you guide our thinking, help us think deeper things, practical things, and just use this in our lives. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
So truth and consequence is what we're going to talk about. And I need to move this way just go. Pilate, we all know, asked Jesus in John 16:38, what is truth? And the implication was absolute truth does not exist, or he wouldn't ask the question. So for Pilate, truth was relative. You know, if Jesus wanted to think he was the Messiah, great for him. I don't believe you're the Messiah. By the way, I'm from California, born and raised there, lived there 50 years before I came here. I totally get that. If it's true for you, man, it's cool. If it's true for me, whatever. I get that culture. I thought I left that behind until I moved to DC. It exists here too. And so the relativistic view of truth is what we're going to look at, which is what our culture believes is alive and well. And it was alive and well even in Christ's day. So if we look at truth on the ropes, there's an old Russian proverb which says one word of truth outweighs the world. And it's the importance of, I have to think of myself as a pastor, I have to teach truth. Even if it bothers people, upsets them, they write me hateful emails, whatever, I have to teach what truth is, even though they have gone off the cliff regarding truth. So Alexander Solzhenitsyn, I read him back in the 70s when I was in college. He wrote Gulag Archipelago. The Russian communists didn't like him because he was anti their entire system. When he was released, he wrote an article. You can read it online. I think every American should read it. It's the title of his speech to Harvard was "Live Not by Lies." And the basic premise of his article is, if they were when the communists took over Russia, they began to teach the people that anybody that had viewpoints that were contrary to what the government said was the party line, you were then persecuted, prosecuted, put in prison, etc. He said, had we only met all of their techniques to silence us, the conservatives, we would have pushed back against communism and it would not have taken over. But because they chose not to say anything and keep their jobs, etc., it took over the entire country. There's a lot of one-to-one correspondence with what's going on in our country today, where they're trying to silence conservative voices, and we'll talk about that. But that's a great speech to read if you have not read it, Live Not by Lies, because as I look at my life, I choose not to live by the lies that they want me to spout. So that's the truth makes falsity implode by definition. And so you get plenty of opportunities to talk about truth in conversations with people in our culture. And my counsel would be, don't be afraid to engage them regarding what is truth. Your forefathers obviously believed in truth because they said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, like anybody can see them. That all men are created equal. They're endowed with their creator with certain inalienable rights that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So our forefathers were theistic in their concept of of reality and truth and believed in that. Yes.
Our notes?
We're just missing.
Yeah, that first page is not there.
Which page are you missing?
Two.
Two.
Those are
That's another $49.95. So I don't know why you're missing page 2.
No, the first two slides.
Oh, you're missing the first 2 slides?
That's it. The one with the Russian quote and this
2,
one.
4, 6, 8, every even.
So you're missing page 2.
And 4, 6, 8,
Oh,
we're back to
12.
Even page.
They're all on.
So you're missing Truth on the Ropes?
We're missing all even pages.
All even pages are missing.
Are you really?
Yeah.
They probably want to print it back to back and then somebody didn't do that.
Oh,
Look at that.
now that's interesting.
Can we get him an email?
Well, I can tell my secretary.
Just print the evens if you're gonna go do it.
I'll see what I can figure
Yeah, I asked Mary Ann because she put them all together. Oh, I apologize for that. Okay, they can just watch. Yeah, what is he talking about? So every other slide, you'll have the deer in headlights on. Okay. So modern men, you have the slide?
Yes.
So he conveniently forgets or argues against the self-evident truths. He doesn't think they're self-evident anymore. There's one postmodern philosopher, here's his view of truth. Truth is what one's peers let them get away with. This is a
that was
philosophy.
really missing from Kokel's talk, wasn't it?
Which part?
He was all about me and you, whereas it seems like the postmodernist is us
Yeah.
against you.
Right. Well, we'll talk about that. Yeah. It's a whole mindset.
Let me know if I'm interrupting too much.
We're
It's okay.
used to them in RTB with
Yeah.
PC. We love
You love him? Okay. We will love you too.
it.
Yeah. But I do have to finish 20 pages of these notes. So
All right,
yeah, you understand that.
got it.
Got it. So what we'll do is we'll kind of where I'm going is we're going to talk about how do we get to the point where we believe what we believe as a culture, that truth is relative. You can come up with whatever you want and it's okay. We're going to talk about philosophically how we got there. And then this afternoon, we'll talk about the 2 different views of truth in our culture. The coherence view of truth, which is what most people believe. And then we'll talk about the correspondence view of truth, which is what Christians typically believe, that truth matches reality. We'll talk about those 2 things and the implications. We'll also finish out this morning by talking about the biblical concept of truth from the Old and the New Testament. And then we'll quit at 11:30, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's kind of where we're going. So that is what the philosophical systems say. He's one of the leading proponents of the postmodern view. Truth in an absolute sense is not knowable. Truth is not above us. Truth is socially constructed, and truth is what we make it out to be. So truth is relative to you, whatever you want it to be. This is your culture. If it's true to you, it must be true. Even if it defies facts, logic, etc., this leads by definition to chaos. Because you can imagine if you applied this to DMV law with how you drive a car, and I think some people do apply it to how they drive. But if everybody thought the DMV book was relative to themselves, hey, I come in here today, I saw a yellow light, I slowed down, the guy next to me hit the gas. And I thought to myself, I could have probably made it, but it might have been a bit red. So I stopped. But if the truth was relative, I just blow through, Because to me, if it's red just for a millisecond, it's not going to hurt if I blow through the intersection. See? But it would lead to total chaos, wouldn't it? And so I saw yesterday when my wife and I were out, went to get some food, and everybody's waiting to turn left in a double turn lane, and there's a big old long line. And so a guy got in front of us, and he's waiting to turn right. And as he got to the front of the line, he pulled in front of all the other cars. Truth is relative to him. It's okay for him to be first. I don't think he goes to our church. He needs to be there. But anyway, so I would call this a weak and illogical and a dangerous view, and it permeates every aspect of life. I deal with it all the time as a pastor. Illustrations, colleges and universities. Any views are tolerated except for, Judeo-Christian view is problematic. But they're big on tolerating all other said views, no matter how crazy they are. Fortune 500 companies, you got to be careful which pronouns you use. And now, my wife's showing me in one of her magazines that she gets, I think it's a Martha Stewart magazine, how you can order these little pins now that you can wear to announce your pronoun to those who are approaching you. It's insanity. Rioters and looters, they're just angry demonstrators supporting their cause. because it's right to them. And we'll talk about how that relates to the coherence view of truth. Kyle Rittenhouse, the verdict, freaked out half the nation. But why? Because they believed he was ipso facto guilty no matter what the facts said. And so you had colleges who didn't even want him applying at the colleges, regardless of what the facts said. They didn't want his presence there. So Christian nationalism is a new term being used today. It's really just a way to talk about Christianity. They might as well drop the nationalism part. They're talking about Christianity, but it is their way to make people think that we who believe in absolute truth are a threat to the nation. And well, we're the ones that believe in law and order, absolute truth, morality, etc. But you're the problem. And they do this based on how they view truth. So we'll talk more about that as we go along. Stated theology. Theology is messed up because people buy into the absolute view of truth. So Legionnaire Ministries, I don't know if you read their annual theological statistics study. It's very interesting to read it from year to year. Like, what do people believe outside the church? What do people believe inside the church? And these are just a smattering of some of the things that have been tainted by relativistic thinking. Jesus was a teacher, but he wasn't God. Well, 52% of the people in the adult population believe that's true. 36% disagree. The Bible, like all sacred writings, contains helpful accounts of ancient myths, but it's not literally true. 48% agree with that. Religion belief is a matter of a personal opinion. It's not about objective truth. 54% of people in the United States believe that. God accepts the worship of all religions, including Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. 42% of people that go to church believe that. That's mind-boggling. How did they get to where they buy that? Well, they believe that truth is relative. So if you want to follow Muhammad and believe in the Quran, hey, it's great for you. I happen to be a Christian, it's good for me. And like Coco was talking about last night, it's like the ice cream choice, that kind of thing. Understanding the decay. True decay it's a cultural condition in which the very idea of absolute objective universal truth is considered implausible. But the whole viewpoint at its core is self-defeating, because to say there's not universal absolute truth is an absolute universal statement. You follow? So these systems like this, they have their own seeds of destruction built into them if you listen to them, because they implode by definition of what they're claiming. So truth doesn't decay or degenerate. Truth is true at all times. So belief, I can believe that the world is flat, like they used to, and draw giant dragons, at the Rock of Gibraltar going into the open ocean, and that you're going to fall off and it's the end of you. But the belief didn't change the truth of that the world was a sphere floating in space. But this is the problem in our culture. They believe that their belief system is tantamount to truth. But truth never changes. So what is true in all times and all cultures. Isaiah 48 says, the grass withers, the flowers fall, but the word of God stands forever. Meaning what God says is true doesn't ever change. So what he says is true in the Old Testament, true in the New Testament, true in our day. Jesus, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Again, Jesus said he was the way, the truth, and the life. And so what he says can never degenerate because he's the essence of truth. Our culture doesn't believe that. Truth can be modified, truth can be changed. Sinful men, however, can stumble with the concept of truth. So Isaiah 59 says one of the things the prophet brings against the nation in its failures is truth has stumbled into streets. So if you study ancient Israel, I have 2 degrees in the Old Testament and a master's degree in Hebrew. So I know a little bit about the Old Testament. So when you study the prophets and you study how did those nations, the nation of Israel implode, they threw truth to the wind. The priests didn't teach truth anymore. In fact, they took the Torah and stuck it in the back of the temple and didn't bother even reading it. The prophets prophesied falsely. They prophesied what the people wanted to hear. And so they threw truth to the wind. What are they doing in our culture? Same thing. Throwing truth to the wind. I mean, educated people throwing truth to the wind. I wrote my 400-page doctoral dissertation on transgenderism back in 2018 when it first hit the United States. Shocking what it has become. That you can get people to believe this worldview that denies biology, science, DNA structure, everything. And it's being pushed on us that you believe this or you're persecuted. And such is the nature of our culture. So our culture has truth stumbling in the streets. Jeremiah, who spoke to the nation before it was invaded by the Babylonians, said truth has perished. It's vanished from their lips. They don't speak truth. I'm going to talk about it tomorrow in my sermon, but I had a person come up to me last Sunday who said one of our parishioners just moved south of here, down toward Fredericksburg, and started going to a church. And they got a new pastor there. And the new pastor said the very first Sunday that they were at the church, that the pastor held up the Bible and said, well, I'm the new pastor here. We won't be using this book anymore. It's too old. Well, yeah. And I'm sure some people will be going, hey, if it's true for you, it's true for us. There's going to be other part of the church is going to be saying, I think we need to talk. But that's happening in churches. There's another pastor a few miles from here whom I have heard from his parishioners that are coming over here that he got up a couple of months ago and said that he's finally come to the conclusion that Jesus is not the only way to God. That's from a Protestant pastor at a large church here, just a few miles from us. So this is where we're heading, is the abandonment of truth. I don't know which slide. I can't see the numbers if you guys have these or you don't have these, but do you have this one?
We have this.
You can read them?
You know what? We're missing every two slides.
Yeah, it's every 2 slides.
Every 2
It's
slides.
on page of the print.
So
Okay.
we're back on now.
No, so this is where we are.
Yep.
Well,
No, if you go back right there, right there's where we are.
let me see. So you're there, so we did this one. So I'm trying to figure out, let's see. Truth.
That's the top of
Because they were-
page 5.
We were probably trying to print 2 slides on the back, and that's what didn't happen.
Yeah, so we have the next slide, slide number 10, which would be page 5. If truth goes, everything goes.
Okay, so do you have this one?
Yes.
Okay.
And we'll have the next one. And then
Interesting. Okay. So we're going to be like schizophrenic right there. Yeah. What did she say?
They're working it.
Okay.
I don't have an ETA yet.
Okay. All right. So on this slide, it says truth can be abandoned by people because it's inconvenient. I mean, if you have kids and you try to raise them when they're high school students, but you tell them certain things, it's inconvenient. The things that you tell them that, you want. Like when my dad used to tell me what curfew was, it's like, yeah, but Cindy and I want to stay out longer than that. Not at my house. It's inconvenient. True. So Jesus said, everyone on this side of truth listens to me, which means by definition, what's the opposite? Well, if you don't listen to him, you're not listening to truth. Pilate's response was, well, then I need to know what is truth. And then Pilate stared truth in the face and mocked Christ. He didn't. He could have said, what could he have said to Jesus about truth? How do I know that you are the Messiah? What's the evidence that you're the Messiah? You have hard evidence? He didn't care. How do we know what constitutes truth? Well, you must first understand the nature of truth. So Francis Schaeffer, who I started reading back in the 70s when I was in college, he said you need to distinguish between the content of truth, what statements are true, from the concept of truth, what is truth. So this podium is here. I can tell you this podium is here. You agree?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is the content of truth is true. Because we can do several tests to determine that this is here. I had it in one of my philosophy classes when I was working on my doctorate. We had a discussion one day for an hour whether the professor's water bottle, Zach Rafino water bottle, was on the desk. I mean, are you serious? This is what philosophers do all day? Are you serious? So we could say that this is here. So that's the content of truth. The problem is the concept of truth in our culture is thrown to the wind, where they don't believe in absolute truth anymore. So we'll talk more about that as we go along. Politics. Well, if truth goes, then what is politics? Well, if nothing's absolutely true, then my group overpowers your group. And that's all it is. That's all politics. We're not debating for what is truth. We're just trying to overthrow the other group because we don't agree with them.
Well, hasn't that always been politics?
Yeah, pretty much.
Dawn of time.
Yeah. That's why Jesus needs to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that constant debate, it's just getting worse. Because we used to believe in at least a divine being, for the most part as a nation. And yeah, maybe. But we have thrown that to the wind. So I think there was greater respect when I was a kid in the 60s than what I see now for people. I was on Vice President Pence's prayer team twice a week for his staff. And the first week I went in there when he became the vice president was on a Wednesday, and I went down to pray for his staff. And when I left, his chief of staff took me out of the White House and took me out to the main gate and talked to him for about 30 minutes. And he said, thank you for coming here because we face evil itself. And I'm like, yeah, I know you do. And that's why I'm here. And so there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that Christian people in politics see. The battle between light and darkness is readily apparent. But it's a problem that I think is worsening when you throw truth to the wind, then anything's possible. Then my group just overpowers your group. Politics, athletics become compromised. Why? Whatever gender that you perceive, well, it's okay with us. When I finished my doctoral dissertation, they were at 70 genders. Now they're over 100 genders. And the Army U.S. chaplaincy program at the Pentagon brought me on to train the general officers and the colonels in the chaplaincy program of how to speak to General Milley, the head of the Joint Chiefs, on transgenderism when it was first infiltrating the Pentagon. And I remember sitting with a bunch of general officers one day trying to explain to them what 70 genders was. It is hard to understand. Once you divorce sex and gender, and you can come up with any kind of gender, it's hard to even track what they're talking about because it defies logic. But that's what happens when you deny truth. Racism is substantiated by any and all means, regardless of facts. So is there racism in our nation? Yeah, absolutely. There absolutely is racism in our nation. Is it systemic? I mean, is it all our nation is about? I was raised in the 60s. My family's from South Carolina. I saw what racism was when I was a kid. Seen it. I grew up 20 years, born and raised on the Mexican border. I experienced racism because I was like the only gringo around. And, so racism isn't here, but they keep it going based on how they want to view truth and the facts. Marriage goes as people toy with, well, should they be faithful in the first place? Or maybe they shouldn't be faithful. So they got rid of the Defense of Marriage Act. It's unconstitutional because it didn't allow for all different combinations of marriages, like gay marriages. So once you allow gay marriages, then you by definition have to allow all kinds of marriages. It just comes with the logical territory, so which is where we're headed. Crime flourishes because you don't want to offend or hurt anybody. Because we don't want to arrest them because their people group commits a lot of those kind of crimes, and that's not fair to that people group, etc. Corruption flourishes because laws which are fluid apply to your opponents and not to you. My father was a federal agent in charge of hundreds of agents on the Mexican border. He dealt more with corrupt agents than he did fighting the cartels because the agents were paid $250,000, $300,000 to let one vehicle drive by. Yeah. And so I grew up in that kind of world, watching my dad with the corruption of agents, federal agents. But that was okay because, hey, I need to help my family. Kids got to go to college, etc. History is rewritten, deconstructed. Why? Because we want it to reflect what we want it to say, regardless of what the facts said. And then Christian doctrine dissolves as Christians attempt to make belief systems, people to feel comfortable and to feel welcomed. So when people go to church, you do want them to feel loved. You want them to feel compassion, care, etc. But you also have to teach truth. And truth, what did Jesus say? He said he came to divide mother from father.
That's your good.
And so, when you teach truth, it bothers people who want it to be fluid and just everybody has a giant kumbaya moment. So there's great temptation for pastors not to teach or professors to teach and water it down so they can grow a church, so they can grow a school, etc. Because once you say, I'm going to teach absolute truth, I'm not going to equivocate, you can lose parishioners, you can lose tithing, you won't have any money to pay for the buildings, the school will shut down, etc. So it has ramifications. Moving on. Reasonable debate serves no purpose. Why? If what you believe is true to you and it's true to me, why debate? There's nothing to debate. And used to we could debate because there was an overarching view of truth. Now there's an overarching view of truth, so it's like, we can all believe whatever we want to believe, so why even have a debate about anything, etc. You watch that unfold in the Supreme Court's debate with the Roe versus Wade decision, which was absolutely shocking and well needed in our culture. But you have one side, calling for many years for it to be overturned. The other side saying, it's the end of the world if this happens. And so now there are, they'll attack Supreme Court justice houses, et cetera, because they feel it's a righteous cause, because that's true in their system. Apart from the fact that you're defending the life of an unborn child. So the hands off my body. What about the child? They have a body, their own DNA structure, et cetera. So, but once you bifurcate the nation into two views of truth, it's hard to arrive at a conclusion that satisfies both sides. So you end up with a balkanized nation, which is what we have.
I think, there's a lot of nuance to a lot of the things you're saying, but I do think that the part of the root problem with people is they're coming from a specific worldview. And because of that,
That's right.
then the framing for
Right.
what is true or what is not
Has
true,
read
what
through
is
that.
real, it shifts and moves. So
That's
I
right.
think
That's exactly right. That's what we're talking about this afternoon. Yeah. Once you buy into that, then everything's read through that.
Yeah, but I don't know if you buy into it, you start off with it because for as a Christian, I have to be clear
Yeah.
that I'm building a worldview from God's word.
Right.
Most people don't come at it from that perspective. They're coming at it from however they're raised, whatever they're taught, whatever their culture is, including American culture.
Right.
They may know nothing about the Bible and
Yeah.
the worldview, but they're all boom, boom, we got to do this or the country's going to fall apart. And that's left or right.
Yeah.
It's coming from a worldview that they're not even conscious of.
True. My sister-in-law, on my wife's side of the family, they're Jewish. So her family didn't know what to do when my wife started dating a Gentile working on a degree in Hebrew. They're like, what are you doing? Because her dad was an atheistic Jew.
Mhm.
My sister-in-law, Jewish, wrote the anti-smoking law for the state of California. But she doesn't like Christians because we control people. And when I bring up that incongruity, she tells me, that's a different issue. And when she worked with Michelle Obama, she worked for 8 years with Michelle Obama writing liberal law code to impact people. But that's my sister-in-law's worldview, is more of the Berkeley kind of worldview in California. And she wants the United States to embrace it. But she's raised like this. You're right. It's her worldview. And so it makes interesting family discussions when we get together. And usually the last major discussion I had with her, she instigated it at a table after dinner, and she just started screaming at me and yelling at me, dropping the F-bomb on me, and I'm like, whoa, I didn't say anything. Yeah, but I know what you think. And so I took her out in the driveway, and I'm like, Martha, I'm your brother-in-law of like 4 years. Can't we just talk? Why do you have to scream at me? But it's that whole, she's a zealot. Yeah.
And probably afraid of something.
No, absolutely. So anyway, makes for fun family conversations. Moving on. What prompts people to exchange objective truth for a subjective truth? Because they do. And there's a bunch of points of why. So the Enlightenment period promised to unleash people's power of reason in the pursuit of universal knowledge. That hasn't happened because man's divided on how he views knowledge. There used to be a meta-narrative or overarching story. It's like the gospel story is a meta-narrative, something that goes above all stories. It answers, why are we here? And what is man's problem? And how does we find a solution for man's problem? Well, that's the story of the gospel. It is the story. But once you say there's not overarching stories, that there are just stories, well, then everybody's view, even if it's diametrically opposed, is true by definition. Like one of my neighbors, his name's, he calls himself Oscar, but his name's really Mohammed. And he's from Pakistan. You know
That's
Oscar.
his last name.
Huh?
Oscar is Oscar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a great guy.
Yeah.
But I can almost not do lawn work in my front yard because he stops me all the time. Because he's retired with nothing to do. He knows what I do for a living, and we're on two opposite ends of everything. So I was trimming a tree the other day in my front yard, and he was walking by, and he stopped me and said, I must know, is Jesus the prophet or not? Now the other one you can just like I guess like throw away so you're not confused. One is true, one is not true.
One is partial.
One matches the facts, yeah, and one partially matches the facts. Okay, so we are on that slide, number 15. Are you there?
Page 7.
Okay. So if you don't believe in truth that's absolute, then you don't really have to have complex problems addressed in culture. You just let them unwind, because that's just what they're doing. So when I did this study back in December of last year, when I wrote all this, AOC at the time, you all know who she is. She's a lawmaker. I know. Actually said in the week of December the 1st, when I was working on this, that looting that was happening at the time wasn't looting. You can see looting. It's like that guy, Baghdad Bob, or whatever his name was, when we're actually rolling tanks in Baghdad and we're attacking, and he's online as the propaganda minister saying, we're not being invaded. It's like, I see tanks, I see US tanks behind you. It's that kind of thing. It's like, looting's looting. Why are you calling it something other than that, or denying that it actually exists? So she's taking her worldview. That no, these are just peaceful people doing what they have to do to support their cause. That's how people get to where they are in our culture. But if you look at philosophically what has happened, if you go from just like pre-modern times to then modern times, if you read all of these things, which we won't be able to cover all of them, all I'm doing is showing to you, if you go through philosophy and you study, what they've done in philosophy is they removed God from the equation and made man the measurement of all things. So if you study philosophy, that's what they're doing. They're trying to figure out how to get God out of the way so man can be the standard of measurement. When man's the standard of measurement, what's the problem? Sin. Yeah. And man has tons of issues and isn't an absolute reference point. So that's what they're trying to do. Years ago, when I was a landscaper, a guy was building a fence, and I've done a lot of fences. Always did them with a laser, a level, a string, to make sure it follows the absolute standard. This guy built it with no string, no level, no laser. He just eyeballed it. So if you looked at his fence when he was done, it was like, man, I don't know what he was smoking, but it's definitely not straight. And I was watching him when he did it. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. And that's like our culture. There's no absolute standard, and then anything's possible. So when you go through these slides, that's what I'm trying to show you, is how they slowly did this. So I won't assume that you love to sit and read about the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the Reformation, but that's what these slides are showing. Follow? They're getting God out of the equation. So when you go from pre-modern times, or even cultures where they're pretty much cohesive as a culture, they hang together, and there's not a lot of outside influence in those cultures. In our culture, you have tons of outside influence, people pushing you to believe in anything and everything. So when you get into philosophy, men are moving people away from God and putting man on the throne. That's what they're doing. So the Enlightenment wasn't really an enlightenment. It was designed to get God off the throne so man could be on the throne. During the Reformation period, when Luther did what he did, this was great because he brought people back to sound doctrine, but it also pulled people away from the concept of the church has the ultimate answers. Because he's like, well, there's this church and then there's this church. So there was a division, and that served to move people in directions away from truth. Enlightenment, which followed the Reformation, was a beachhead for modernism, which is going to remove God. Remember, you're trying to remove God for what reason? If I get God out of the way, then I can devise what I want to. I mean, it's basically that simple. So this is what they are trying to do in philosophy. So in modernism, what they're trying to do is say, we believe in a God, like deism. There is a God. We believe, but he has nothing to do with our world. He created it, but he's outside our world, so it's a closed system. But we still believe in morals. That went by the wayside as we headed into our area of postmodernism with Friedrich Nietzsche, which I'll show you. This is what they did. So sometimes you'll talk to people who they'll believe in God, but it's more of a deistic concept that, well, I believe in God. Yeah, but is he part of our world? Well, not really. But they'll believe in morals. They'll still believe in morals. They just don't believe that God is in part of our world. I believe there's a God who's immanent and transcendent. And by definition of who he is, morals are directly related to him. Once you start pushing God out of the cosmos, which you can't by definition because he's omnipresent, but that's what they do. As they attempt to do that and they put themselves in there, then they can devise what they want to do. So this is, go back to the Garden of Eden, same thing that the devil did with Eve. Did God say?
Really?
Did he really say that? Because the day that you eat, you're going to be just like him. Translated, you're going to push him off the throne. You're going to be on the throne. Everything's going to be great. Somebody should have talked to her because that is the opposite of what happened. So that is what you find when you go through these slides, that the modernists believe in a God. He's just not part of what we're doing. When you get over to Friedrich Nietzsche in 1844 to 1900, he just declared God was dead. That was convenient. Basically, it's what he does. So he didn't like Enlightenment philosophers because they actually still believed in God and were moral in relationship to God. He didn't like that at all. He's like, I got to get rid of God altogether. So for him, there is no God. And if there is no God, then he's free to design reality and morality exactly how he wants to. And that's exactly what has happened. So there are similarities between these systems. Both are basically atheistic because one has God outside the system. One has no God outside the system at all. Both are agnostic in their leanings. Well, we don't know for sure if there's a God. And both are united in their naturalism, the belief that the material universe is all there is. So a deist believes God's outside of it, and we're on our own. And somebody who's postmodern doesn't even believe there's a God at all. And that's where apologetics comes in, to where you have to present to them the reasons why there is a personal being, a personal God, the logical evidences of that. You have these slides now, don't you? So I want to move. So I'm not going to cover all of these slides. If you push God off the throne and you make rules of yourself, you get Genesis 21:25 all over again, which is every man did which was right in his own eyes. Right? Once you do that, you have no society. You have absolute mayhem in society. And that's exactly where we are headed. In the pre-modern times, adherents deny objective truth outside the natural realm. So God and all concepts tied to values and morality and spirituality, etc., those are just concepts. It's not absolutely true. The human mind is nothing more than biochemical processes. This is how modern man views things. So it leads to lots of questions. So Kokol talked today about the art of asking questions. You were there? Right. So that's called the Socratic method. As you engage people who don't believe in absolute truth, you should be thinking, what questions do I need to ask them? And that is what this is to engage them and begin to ask them questions about their system, because the system doesn't hang together. Like, if all truth is relative, then how do they know that? If nothing's absolutely true, because it destroys their entire position. So he's all about asking great questions. Have you read the book Tactics, by the way? Oh, you bought it? Yeah, it is excellent. Moving on. I want to go to
Nancy Piercy does a good job.
She does. She is excellent. Yes, I read a bunch of her books. She's good. She has a book called The Soul of Science. Have you read that one? It's excellent. It's how they pushed God off the throne of science. And when they did that, then we got what we got. That is an excellent book, if you haven't read it.
Who was the author?
Nancy Piercy. She wrote a lot of books with Chuck Colson back in the day. Chuck Colson used to work for Nixon. Yeah, but in 1980, when I graduated from college, he was actually the commencement speaker after Watergate. Go figure. That's who spoke at my university, was Chuck Colson. Like, weren't you a criminal? And yeah, go figure. That was a long time ago. So definition of truth in the Old Testament. So the Hebrew word for truth is something I want you to look at. The Hebrew word for truth is the word emet. This little word here, emet. That's a transliteration of the Hebrew. Basically, it means that which conforms to the facts. So how do I know that there's a podium here? Look, conforms to the facts. So how do I prove it's here? How do I prove it's here? Huh? Can I prove it's here?
You pound on it.
You cannot leave at 11:30. We are staying here until we finish all these notes. No, I'm hungry. Okay, so I could bite it. It wouldn't taste very good. I could scratch it. I could pick it up and throw it and see it move through the air. I mean, there's all the things I could do to prove to you this here. But suppose I say, well, I just feel it's not really here. This is a projection of my mind, and I feel my mind is projected this here. And since my mind is the standard of all measurement of truth, it must by definition not be here. Literally. This is our culture. You're like, those people are crazy. Yeah. So truth, it corresponds to the facts. So you go through the Old Testament and you study this word. It represents what corresponds to known reality. That really happened. So they talked about it last night. When Moses threw his staff down, did he have a staff?
Yes.
What was it made out of? Wood. What did it become? A snake. How'd that happen? God can turn a staff into a snake and then back into a piece of wood again. But how do we know that happened? Well, because it conforms to the facts of what they said they saw. That's what happened. Corresponding to reality. The first time I take people to Israel on archaeology trips, and so I do it twice a year. First time I went to Israel right after 9/11, I was coming out of, and I never thought I'd go there again. I was leaving the Galilee basin where the Sea of Galilee is. It was overcast the whole week I was there. It's terrible. It's like no sun at all. And as I was leaving the Galilee basin by Tiberias, driving up the road in the bus, I sat at the back of the bus at the window looking back at the Sea of Galilee thinking, that is so awesome. And as I was doing that, 3 holes formed in the clouds. It is totally cloudy. 3 holes opened, you could see blue sky, and 3 beams of light hit directly in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. Well, what do you think my observation was? God's like, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, just thank you for coming here. I still get chills thinking about it. It's like, I'm screaming at the rest of the bus, are you looking out the window? Now we can all verify that happened. Why? We were there. I saw it happen. Why wasn't it 4 holes? Why wasn't it 10 holes? Why wasn't it 2 holes? Why did it happen just when we're driving out of there over the mountain range by Mount Tabor? I mean, whoa. What was God saying? I'm here. I'm here. Corresponds to the facts. We all on the bus saw it. So this is the concept of truth. That you give a testimony of what relates to the facts. You can read that one on your own. Because these are just illustrations that everything in the Old Testament talks about speaking truth as it relates to facts. So there's a true prophet and a false prophet. How do you know a false prophet? Well, he prophesied, it didn't come to pass. He said he was writing for some edgy magazine and giving prophecies, January the 1st, but they didn't come to pass. So he's a false prophet as opposed to true. So how do you know what is true? Well, you look at the opposite of it. What is the opposite of that which corresponds to the facts? So in the Old Testament, this is huge. It's laid out that everything about truth relates to the facts. Your culture does not believe this. Okay? Like a young boy can say, well, I feel like I'm a girl. Well, how do you know that? Well, I just feel it's true. Well, your biological evidence shows otherwise. No, but I feel I'm the opposite of that. Well, but your DNA structure shows that you are a boy. Well, that doesn't matter. I feel like I'm a girl. And so the feeling defies objective reality, and you're asked to believe that. That's where we are. It's contrary to how God laid things out. In the New Testament, key element is to understand, the LXX is the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Old Testament. So after Alexander the Great invaded the known world and Grecianized Israel, a lot of the young people couldn't read the Hebrew anymore. So they had to write the Old Testament in Greek so they could read it. So the Greek version of the Hebrew takes the word emet, the word truth, and they substitute it with the word aletheia. And aletheia, this particular word in Greek, this is transliterated from the Greek. That particular A letter there is called an alpha privative. So anytime you take the alpha and you stick it on the beginning of a word, you negate the word. So what does truth mean in the New Testament? The word letheia, this part of the word, means that which is hidden or not known. If I put an alpha privative on the front of it, I just negated that and said, no, it's known. How is it known? Corresponds to the facts. Absolutely corresponds to the facts. Bear in mind that your culture, which we'll talk about this afternoon, believes that that which corresponds to how a group feels is true. You see, this is totally different. That's where your culture's at. So, New Testament. The primary New Testament emphasis is on conformity to that which is reality, not that which is not related to reality. So, again, our culture has totally lost this whole concept. These verses just really show you the opposite between truth and error, because it corresponds to the facts. This is the viewpoint that I believe in, because I believe in the correspondence view of truth. As we'll talk about this afternoon, your culture believes in the coherence view of truth. So if my little group gets together and believes this to be true, and there's enough of us, it's true for our group. And it's very hard to talk with those kind of people because you're not talking about facts, you're talking about emotion. It's what they emotionally hold to. You know what I'm saying? I have 5 minutes.
That ice cream.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So let's see. I wrote this all out knowing I'm not going to cover all of this. You can read. So, distinctions of biblical truth. God reveals truth through general revelation. You can look at general revelation and see through the complexity of the cosmos, there must be a divine being. Like DNA code. What's the probability that DNA code structured itself in a ladder format the way that it is? Oh, it's 10 to the 186th power. Couldn't happen. So that's revelation. God gave us special revelation, Holy Scriptures. How do I know the Bible is the Word of God among all holy books? Well, for me personally, as I've studied prophecy in the Old Testament, is extremely precise. So precise no man could know it. God had to tell them. And that, in my view, validates it. Because I've read all the other holy books. None of them do this with specificity. So that God reveals his truth. Objective truth exists and is known. Truth exists because the God of truth exists. He's the standard of measurement. So he's like the laser level when you're building the fence that you measure it up against. He's there, which explains what objective truth is all about. Culture is the opposite. It's about rhetoric and feelings. So enter my sister-in-law, Martha. I try to talk to her. What does she do? She yells and screams at me. That is what she does. You know, and I had to take her outside and say, okay, look, before I'm a Republican and you're a Democrat, but above all that, we're both Americans. Why can't we talk as Americans instead of yelling and screaming? And she stopped screaming. And then we had a conversation. I haven't convinced her of my viewpoints yet, but it's like, there's evil in all of these political people. I've seen it. And we must be all concerned about that. So Christian truth is absolute, isn't it? I mean, it's the narrow way. I mean, it is absolutely that which is not argued. I mean, it is true because of the absolute nature of it. So if God is changeless, and he is by definition who he is as God, then anything that he says is changeless and true. So people think, morals that should be changed in our culture, but God says, no, certain things are sinful and they're always sinful and you can't modify them. So we believe in absolute truth because we believe in a God who's absolutely existent. Truth is universal. So whatever is true in one culture is true in all cultures, according to what the scriptures teach. Truth is not Trinity. Campuses have a false view of truth because it's, well, whatever's Trinity at the moment. No, but truth is true. Beliefs change. And what they argued on college campuses back in the day is changed and morphed into bizarre things that they argue today. But truth never changes, no matter how trendy people feel it is. Truth is exclusive, it's specific, and it's antithetical. So to say something's true is to exclude that which is false. So if I say that this podium exists here, it's a true statement. And the opposite of that cannot be true, that it's not here. You would think I was a fool and would probably never come back to this church ever if I tried to argue that it wasn't here, right? This guy's insane, he's crazy, he thinks his podium's not there. I can see it, I ran into it, I tripped over it coming in, etc. So it's antithetical once you make a statement. We will stop there, I have 1 minute.
All right.
Questions? I know it's a fire hose. It's usually, my wife told me when I left this morning, do not do the fire hose thing. I'm like, well, probably too late. That's why I typed all the notes out. You can read about it and think about it.
This question is back to kind of the worldview piece. How do you frame kind of the Christian anchor for our faith? As part of Christian worldview is the eternal perspective. I mean, it's all over the place in the New Testament.
Right.
So how do you frame that or fit that in with some of the challenges that we're dealing with in the world that they obviously aren't going to have an eternal perspective? So how do you then, I mean, maybe you'll talk about this later, but deal with the world when it comes to not going to have an eternal perspective?
I know. I had a man in my office the other day. He was a graduate of Annapolis. Was a Marine, was an officer, had a whole career, 20-something years. Got out of that, became an investment banker. He's now quite wealthy, has done very well. So he got a divorce. Then there was another lady, I think she was Christian. Her husband passed away. She met him like eHarmony. They got married. That's a whole nother question. What was she thinking? She married him. He's a total atheist. And so she brought him to my office the other day. Quintessential cultural person. And she sat down and she told me, she goes, I don't know what to do with him anymore. Yeah, I can't answer his questions. So I told him, Charlie, you need to come down and talk to my pastor. And so here came in this big Marine, sat down, and he goes, okay, I got lots of questions. And I'm like, okay, God has lots of answers. And so I said, let's talk. And so for about 2 hours, he fired all of his questions. About halfway through the questions, he looked at me and he said, I got a feeling you've answered these kind of questions before. I go, yeah. Most lost people ask the same kind of questions. And it was all worldview stuff. It's like saying, hey, Charlie, this is what you say, but this is why you could never live like this. And without me quoting Bible verses, which he will throw out the door, this is where, you know about the four methods of classical of apologetics? There's 4 methods. So there's classical apologetics. Is there a God? Evidential apologetics. Let me show you the evidence. Presuppositionalism is the word of God.
Thank you.
You know what I'm saying? And then there's fideism, which is my faith proves that there is. See? So with him, I'm coming. With him, I only fielded one question.
Yeah.
So
There's only one question.
So with him, I started with item 1. Hey, Charlie, is there a God? Because if there's evidence that there's a God, then that God could have spoken. And if that God spoke, how would we know what book he spoke in? You see what I mean? So to take him from his worldview, that's all jacked up, and his life's all jacked up, is trying to start where he's at, where he doesn't even think there's a God. So I had to start there to help him reason toward the God who had spoken. Yeah. And that's fun. Because when the lights come on, because he told me when we were done, he goes, I cannot believe that there's been answers to all my questions. He's in church every Sunday. Has a huge smile on his face. He's not saved yet.
I was about to ask.
No, not yet. But he's thinking about it. Yeah. But it's having that conversation. Yeah.
So,
Take it off.
when my kids go to campus, they're like, now everybody introduce themselves and then give their pronoun or whatever,
Right.
how you want to do
Right.
it. So when they bring their friends to my home, how do I address?
So this is the whole thing. So it's like, remember I started with Solzhenitsyn, living out by lies? You have to determine how much of their game am I going to play.
And I can,
You can't. So Solzhenitsyn's advice was, you don't play the game.
right?
I will not do that. So I won't call you by your pronoun, and I won't whatever. So you decide I'm not going to do that. Now they're going to call you names and stuff. But if people push back against that, it implodes by definition. They're asking you to believe a lie. So don't play the lie.
But I guess what I'm asking also is, so people that, like, if they're non-believers, right?
Right.
Where do you start that engagement if you have that? It's probably a long way.
Well, this calls for wisdom. So it's like, should I go to my best friend's lesbian marriage with his sister?
But if
or what?
they bring them, and I want to engage into a conversation, how do you, I guess, start that without,
So is Jesus forceful with truth with people?
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Drove some of them away, and some of them, like Nicodemus, said, hey, I need to talk to you. So your definitive position is going to lead in two directions. Some will not want to have anything to do with you anymore, and our kids can't play together.
Right.
Others will go, wow, I need to talk to somebody like you that's not afraid to take a view of reality that's contrary to the culture. I need to talk to someone like you. But as you constantly acquiesce to what they're asking you to do, you're not going to earn that right to really talk to them.
Right.
Because they're going to lose respect. So somewhere along the line, you have to say, I will not cross that line. And that it's down to call you a they. It's grammatically incorrect. Or a ze, or whatever they want you to do.
Right.
So you have to make this decision with your children. We abide by what is reality, not what is unreality.
Right.
Otherwise, they're controlling your view of reality. It's not a simple place to be. I'm not saying it is.
Right.
I mean, I get asked this all. Do I show up? Do I do a wedding to two transgenders?
Right.
You see what I mean? Yeah, it's not simple. Yeah.